The garage door creaked as Marcus Chen pushed it open, the familiar sound that had become his nightly greeting for the past 3 months. The November chill of suburban Seattle cut through his thin jacket, and he could see his breath forming small clouds in the dim light filtering through the single bulb hanging from the ceiling. He set down his laptop bag on the makeshift desk he'd constructed from an old door and 2 sawhorses, careful not to disturb the precarious stack of engineering textbooks that served as his nightstand. Home sweet home, he muttered to himself, the irony not lost on him as he glanced at the air mattress in the corner, already beginning to deflate again despite his attempts to patch it earlier that week. The main house, his childhood home, glowed warmly through the small window that connected the garage to the kitchen. He could see his stepmother, Linda, moving about inside, preparing dinner for his father and his 2 step-siblings, Trevor and Ashley. The aroma of pot roast drifted through the gaps in the doorframe, making his stomach growl. He'd grabbed a sandwich from the cafeteria at Microsoft before leaving work, knowing that family dinner hadn't included him since Linda had convinced his father that the garage conversion would help Marcus build character and independence. Marcus pulled out his phone to check the time. 7:43 p.m. His father would be home from his law firm any minute. He quickly changed out of his work clothes and into sweats and a hoodie, hanging his dress shirt carefully on the rod he'd installed across one corner of the garage. Every morning, he had to be strategic about when he entered the house to shower and get ready for work, usually before 5:30 a.m. when everyone else was still asleep. The sound of his father's BMW pulling into the driveway made Marcus pause. Through the small window, he watched Richard Chen step out of his car, briefcase in hand, his expression tired but brightening as he approached the front door. Marcus remembered when that smile used to be for him, back before his mother had died 5 years ago, before Linda had entered their lives with her perfect smile and her 2 teenagers who somehow deserved bedrooms, while Marcus, at 25 with a full-time job as a software engineer, was relegated to the garage. His phone buzzed. A text from his colleague and friend, David. "Still on for drinks Friday? Sarah's bringing her roommate. She saw your photo and wants to meet you." Marcus stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. How could he explain that he couldn't invite anyone back to his place because his place was a garage that smelled faintly of motor oil and had concrete floors that never quite got warm, even with the space heater running constantly? "Rain check," he typed back. "Big project deadline coming up." It was becoming his standard excuse. The truth was too humiliating, that despite graduating summa cum laude from the University of Washington, despite landing a job at one of the most prestigious tech companies in the world, despite earning more than most people his age could dream of, he was sleeping in a garage because his stepmother had convinced his father that her children needed their space for their crucial high school years. A knock on the side door interrupted his thoughts. His father's face appeared in the doorway, looking uncomfortable as he always did when he ventured into Marcus's domain. "Hey, son," Richard said, not quite meeting Marcus's eyes. "How was work?" "Fine, Dad. We're launching the new cloud infrastructure next month." Marcus kept his voice neutral, professional. He'd learned that emotional conversations with his father only ended one way, with Richard retreating and Linda's influence growing stronger. That's great." Richard shifted his weight, glancing back toward the house. "Listen, Linda wanted me to remind you about the house rules. She said she heard you come in around 5:45 this morning, and it woke Ashley. Maybe you could—" "I'll be quieter." Marcus cut him off. "I apologize for disrupting Ashley's beauty sleep while I was trying to get ready for my job." The sarcasm wasn't lost on Richard, who had the decency to look ashamed. "Marcus, you know this is just temporary. Once Trevor graduates, that's 2 years away, Dad." Marcus couldn't keep the frustration out of his voice. "I'm 25 years old. I have a computer science degree, I make 6 figures, and I'm sleeping in a garage while your wife's kids each have their own rooms in the house my mother left to us." Richard's face hardened at the mention of Marcus's mother. "Linda is my wife now, Marcus. This is her home too. And Trevor and Ashley are minors. They need their space, I know. You've mentioned it." Marcus turned away, booting up his laptop. "I have code to review. Can you please close the door? The heat bill is already high enough without warming the whole neighborhood." His father stood there for a moment longer, and Marcus could feel the weight of things unsaid hanging between them. But as always, Richard chose the path of least resistance. "Good night, son." The door clicked shut, and Marcus was alone again. He stared at his laptop screen, but the code blurred as his eyes burned with unshed tears of frustration. He'd been saving every penny he could after paying his father the rent Linda had insisted on. $800 a month for a garage without proper insulation, without a bathroom, without basic dignity. He pulled up his banking app and looked at the balance in his savings account. $47,132. It was substantial. But not enough for a down payment on a house in Seattle's insane market. Not yet. But he was getting closer every month, every paycheck where he ate ramen for lunch and declined social invitations that might cost money. The sound of laughter drifted from the main house. Through the window, he could see the family gathered around the dining table. Trevor was gesticulating wildly, telling some story that had everyone in stitches. Ashley was on her phone, probably texting, while Linda smiled indulgently at her son. Richard sat at the head of the table, looking every inch the proud patriarch of his new family. Marcus had eaten at that table every night for 20 years. His mother had chosen it, a beautiful mahogany piece that she'd saved for months to afford. Now he wasn't welcome there. He minimized his banking app and opened a real estate website instead. He'd been browsing every night, torture and motivation combined. Most houses in the neighborhood started at $800,000. Empty lots were rare and still commanded $300,000 or more. But he kept looking, kept dreaming, kept plotting. His phone rang, disrupting his search. The caller ID showed his Aunt Patricia, his mother's sister who lived in Portland. "Hi, Aunt Pat," he answered, trying to inject some warmth into his voice. "Marcus, honey, how are you?" Her voice was full of concern. She'd been checking on him more frequently lately. "I tried calling earlier but couldn't reach you. I was at work. Big project keeping me busy." He moved to sit on his air mattress, wincing as it squeaked under his weight. "Mm-hmm. And how are things at home?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. Aunt Pat was the only family member who knew about his living situation. She'd been furious when she found out, had even offered to let him move to Portland. But his job, his life, everything was in Seattle. "The same," he admitted. "Oh, sweetheart." He could hear the sympathy in her voice. "You know, I've been thinking I have some money saved from your Uncle Robert's life insurance. I could—" "No, Aunt Pat. I appreciate it, but no. I need to do this myself." His pride wouldn't let him accept charity, even from someone who loved him, especially from someone who loved him. "You're just like your mother," she said softly. "Stubborn as a mule. She'd be so proud of you, you know, and so angry about, well, I know." Marcus felt his throat tighten. His mother would have never let this happen. She'd been tiny but fierce, especially when it came to protecting her son. "I miss her. I miss her too, honey. Every day." There was a pause. "You know, there's no shame in starting over somewhere else. Portland has tech jobs too. You could stay with me until you found a place. This is my home, Aunt Pat. Mom loved this house, this neighborhood. I'm not going to let them drive me away." "All right, but the offer stands. And Marcus, don't let this situation make you bitter. Your mother wouldn't want that. Find your happiness, whatever that looks like." After they hung up, Marcus sat in the gathering darkness of the garage, illuminated only by his laptop screen. He pulled up the real estate website again, but this time, he narrowed his search to just his street. There were only 2 listings in the entire neighborhood. One was a mansion 3 blocks away listed at $1.2 million. The other, Marcus sat up straighter, his heart beginning to race. The other was the house next door, the Thompsons' house. He'd heard through neighborhood gossip that Mr. Thompson had been transferred to his company's Tokyo office. The house had been sitting empty for 2 months. With trembling fingers, he clicked on the listing. $650,000. It was still more than he could afford, but he opened his investment account in another tab. Between his savings and his stock options that had vested, he had $73,000. If he liquidated everything, if he qualified for an FHA loan with 3.5% down, he grabbed his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for. Janet Morrison, a realtor who was also the mother of his high school friend. She'd told him to call if he ever needed anything. He looked at the time. 8:47 p.m. Not too late. Before he could lose his nerve, he hit the call button. "Hello? Mrs. Morrison? It's Marcus Chen. I know it's late, but I have a question about a listing." 20 minutes later, Marcus ended the call with an appointment to view the Thompson house that Saturday. His hands were shaking with a combination of excitement and terror. The math would be tight. He'd have to liquidate all his investments, take the penalty on his 401k early withdrawal, and hope he qualified for the loan. He'd be eating ramen for real after mortgage payments, not just by choice. Through the small window, he could see Linda clearing the dinner table, directing Trevor to help with dishes while Ashley disappeared upstairs. His father sat in his recliner, watching the news. A perfect family scene that didn't include him. Marcus opened his laptop again and began working on the code review he'd promised to finish. But his mind kept drifting to Saturday, to the possibility of walking through a house that could be his. Not just any house, the house next door. He imagined Linda's face when she realized her garage-dwelling stepson would be her neighbor. He imagined having his own kitchen, his own bathroom, his own dignity returned to him. The garage grew colder as the night deepened. Marcus pulled on a second hoodie and wrapped himself in the sleeping bag he'd bought rated for camping in sub-zero temperatures. It was overkill for Seattle, but the concrete floor had a way of sucking warmth from everything. He thought about his mother, about what she would say if she could see him now. She'd probably be heartbroken that his father had let this happen, but she'd also be proud that he hadn't given up, that he was working toward a solution. His phone buzzed with another text from David. "No problem about Friday, but seriously, man, you've been MIA lately. Everything okay?" Marcus looked around the garage. At his life, condensed into a 400-square-foot space that still smelled like the previous owner's vintage Mustang. He thought about all the lies he'd told, all the excuses he'd made, all the dignity he'd swallowed. "Everything's fine," he typed back. "Just working on something big. I'll tell you about it soon." Because if Saturday went well, if the numbers worked out, if the bank approved his loan, he would have something to tell. He'd have the ultimate response to being made to sleep in a garage, not just moving out, but moving right next door. Close enough that Linda would see him every day. A constant reminder that she might have pushed him out of his childhood home, but she hadn't broken him. Marcus allowed himself a small smile as he closed his laptop for the night. He set his phone alarm for 5 a.m., giving himself time to get ready before the family woke up. Tomorrow was Thursday. 2 more days until Saturday. 2 more days until he could start taking his life back. As he lay on the deflating air mattress, listening to the rain beginning to tap against the garage roof, Marcus didn't feel the usual despair that had become his nightly companion. Instead, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. It was fragile and uncertain, but it was there, warming him more than any space heater could. The main house had gone dark, his father and Linda retreating to the master bedroom that had once belonged to his parents. But Marcus didn't feel the usual stab of resentment. Let them have it. He was going to build something new, something that was entirely his. He fell asleep that night dreaming not of the past he'd lost, but of the future he was going to create, 1 square foot at a time, starting with the house next door. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp, clear weather that made Seattle's rainy reputation seem like a lie. Marcus had been awake since 4 a.m., unable to sleep from anticipation. He'd spent the previous 2 days at work in a fog, mechanically writing code while his mind calculated mortgage payments, down payments, and closing costs over and over again. He'd showered and dressed carefully, choosing his best jeans and a button-down shirt that suggested responsible future homeowner, rather than desperate garage dweller. Janet Morrison was meeting him at 10 a.m., and he wanted to make the right impression, even though she'd known him since he was in middle school. At 9:45 a.m., Marcus slipped out of the garage and walked around to the front of his father's house. He could see Linda in the kitchen window, and for a moment, their eyes met. She frowned, probably wondering why he was dressed nicely on a Saturday. But Marcus just gave her a neutral nod and continued walking. The Thompson house sat on a corner lot, slightly larger than his father's property. It was a 1950s Craftsman, painted sage green with white trim, though the paint was beginning to peel in places. The yard was overgrown, 2 months of Seattle rain and neglect turning what had been Mrs. Thompson's prized garden into a jungle of weeds and untamed rhododendrons. "Marcus!" Janet Morrison's voice called out. She was walking up the sidewalk, her silver hair perfectly styled, wearing the kind of casually expensive clothes that successful realtors seem to favor. "Oh, honey, look at you! Look, so grown up and handsome. How long has it been?" "Hi, Mrs. Morrison. Thanks for meeting me on a Saturday." Marcus accepted her hug, breathing in her familiar perfume that reminded him of his mother's book club meetings. "Please, call me Janet, and Saturday showings are prime time in real estate." She pulled out a large key ring and began searching for the right key. "I was surprised to hear from you. Last I knew, you were living with your father after college?" "I'm still living there," Marcus said carefully, "but it's time for me to move out. Get my own place." Janet found the key and turned to look at him, her realtor smile softening into something more maternal. "Good for you, sweetie. Independence is important. Though, I have to say, this might be a bit ambitious for a first home. Have you been pre-approved for a loan?" "I have an appointment with a lender on Monday," Marcus admitted, "but I've run the numbers. With my salary and credit score, I should qualify." "Well then, let's take a look." Janet unlocked the door and stepped aside. "After you." The moment Marcus crossed the threshold, he felt something shift in his chest. The house smelled musty and closed up, but underneath that was the scent of old wood and possibility. The entryway opened into a living room with original hardwood floors, scratched and dull but solid. A brick fireplace dominated one wall, its mantel empty but waiting. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 1,150 square feet, Janet recited, switching into her professional mode. Original hardwoods throughout, updated kitchen in 2010, new roof in 2018. The Thompsons maintained it well, though it needs some cosmetic updating. Marcus barely heard her. He was moving through the space like a man in a dream, seeing not what was, but what could be. The living room flowed into a dining area with built-in china cabinets. The kitchen had granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, not top of the line, but respectable. A window over the sink looked directly into his father's backyard. "The master bedroom is through here," Janet said, leading him down a hallway. The master was spacious, with an ensuite bathroom that had been updated with a tile shower. Marcus stood in the middle of the room, imagining his bed against the far wall, maybe a reading chair by the window, his clothes in the closet instead of hanging from a rod in a garage, his dignity restored. "What do you think so far?" Janet asked, watching him carefully. "It's perfect," Marcus said quietly. "Can I see the other bedrooms?" The second bedroom was smaller but bright, with 2 windows facing the street. The third bedroom was at the back of the house, and when Marcus looked out its window, he found himself staring directly at the garage where he currently lived. The irony wasn't lost on him. "This would make a great home office," Janet suggested. "Perfect for someone in tech." "Yes," Marcus agreed, his voice rough. "It would." They toured the rest of the house. A partially finished basement that could be additional living space, a 2-car garage that was actually used for cars instead of housing stepchildren, a backyard that needed work but had good bones. Throughout it all, Marcus felt a growing certainty that this was it. This was his path forward. "I want to make an offer," he said as they stood in the backyard, looking back at the house. Janet raised an eyebrow. "Honey, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but you haven't even been pre-approved yet. And there are other interested parties. The Thompsons priced it to sell quickly." "How quickly?" Marcus felt panic rise in his throat. "Are there other offers?" "Not yet, but I'm showing it to 3 other groups this weekend." Janet's expression was sympathetic. "Look, why don't you get your pre-approval on Monday and then we can—" "What if I offered asking price? Cash for the down payment, no financing contingency besides the loan approval?" Janet studied him for a long moment. "Marcus, can I ask you something? And I want you to be honest with me. Why this house? There are condos downtown that would be easier for a young man to manage, closer to Microsoft's campus. Why do you need this particular house?" Marcus looked back at his father's house where he could see Trevor's BMW parked in the driveway, the BMW that Linda had convinced Richard to buy for her son's 18th birthday, while Marcus paid rent to sleep in a garage. "Because it's next door," he said simply. "Because every morning when I leave for work and every night when I come home, I need them to see that they didn't break me." Janet's expression shifted from professional to protective. "Oh, honey, what happened? Last I heard, Richard was so proud of you, getting that job at Microsoft." The story spilled out of Marcus then, standing in the overgrown backyard of his potential future home. He told her about his mother's death, about Linda's arrival, about the slow erosion of his place in his own home until he was paying rent to sleep in a garage while Linda's children occupied the bedrooms he and his mother had once painted together. By the time he finished, Janet's perfectly made-up face was tight with anger. "That woman," she said, and the venom in her voice surprised Marcus. "I knew there was something off about her when she showed up at the country club, hanging all over Richard barely a year after Sweet Lily passed. You knew my mom? We were in book club together for 10 years. She would be horrified, absolutely horrified, to know what's happened." Janet squared her shoulders. "All right, here's what we're going to do. You're going to write an offer letter, not just the numbers, but a personal letter to the Thompsons about why you want their home. Tom Thompson grew up here too. He'll remember your mother. Then you're going to get pre-approved for that loan, and we're going to make this happen. You think it will work? Honey, I've been selling houses for 30 years. Cash talks, but stories sell. And your story?" She looked meaningfully at the garage. "Your story is going to get you this house." They went back inside, and Janet pulled out her tablet to start drafting the offer. As she typed, she asked questions about his finances, his employment history, his plans for the house. Marcus answered everything honestly, watching his future take shape in digital form. "We'll offer asking price $650,000, Janet said. "You'll put down 5%, that's $32,500, which leaves you some cushion for closing costs and moving expenses. With your salary, you should qualify for the loan, but rates are high right now. Your mortgage payment will be around $4,800 a month. Can you swing that?" Marcus had done the math 100 times. It would be tight, more than half his take-home pay. But he was already paying $800 for the garage, and he'd rather eat peanut butter sandwiches in his own home than steaks in someone else's garage. "I can manage it." "All right, then." Janet's fingers flew across the tablet. "I'll submit this today with your pre-approval contingent. Write that letter this weekend. Email it to me by tomorrow night. And Marcus, don't tell anyone about this until we have an accepted offer." Especially not, she gestured toward his father's house. I won't say a word. As they walked back to the front of the house, Marcus took one last look at what might be his. The morning sun was hitting the front windows, making them glow golden. He could see it already. The lawn mowed, the garden restored, his name on the mailbox. Thank you, Janet, he said as she locked the door. For everything. Don't thank me yet. We still have to get your offer accepted and your loan approved. But Marcus? She squeezed his shoulder. Your mother would be so proud of you. And somewhere, I think she's pulling strings to make this happen. Marcus walked back to his father's house, to the garage, with his head high. As he passed the kitchen window, he saw Linda watching him again, her expression curious and slightly suspicious. He gave her the same neutral nod as before and continued to the garage. Inside, he immediately opened his laptop and began writing the letter to the Thompsons. He wrote about growing up in the neighborhood, about his mother teaching him to ride a bike on their street, about wanting to preserve the character of the home they'd loved for so many years. He didn't mention the garage or his stepmother or the revenge fantasy that partially motivated him. Instead, he wrote about coming home, about building a future, about the American dream of homeownership. He rewrote it 6 times, each version more polished than the last. By the time he was satisfied, it was nearly 6 p.m. and his stomach was growling. He grabbed his keys, planning to hit the grocery store for his usual weekend supplies, when there was a knock on the garage door. Come in, he called, expecting his father. But it was Trevor who entered, looking uncomfortable and younger than his 18 years. Hey, Marcus. Trevor. Marcus kept his voice neutral. It wasn't the kid's fault his mother was who she was. What's up? Trevor shoved his hands in his pockets. I heard you walking around this morning, early. Mom said you were dressed up. Are you going on dates or something? Marcus almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Something like that. Cool. Trevor shifted his weight. Look, I know things are weird with you living out here and stuff. Mom says it's what you wanted, but what? Trevor met his eyes for the first time in months. But I'm not stupid. I know she pushed for it, and I know it sucks. And I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air between them. Marcus studied his stepbrother, seeing not Linda's entitled son, but a kid who was perhaps more aware than anyone gave him credit for. Thanks, Trevor. I appreciate that. Yeah, well, Trevor turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I think you're pretty cool. The way you just handle everything, don't let it get to you. I'd have lost it by now. Who says I haven't? Marcus asked quietly. Trevor gave him a long look. Because you're still here. Still getting up every morning, going to work, doing your thing. That takes guts. He opened the door. Anyway, see you around. After Trevor left, Marcus sat in the gathering dusk, thinking about the unexpected conversation. Maybe buying the house next door wasn't just about revenge. Maybe it was about showing Trevor and Ashley that there was another way to live, with integrity and independence, even when things got hard. He returned to his letter, adding a final paragraph about being part of a community, about wanting to contribute to the neighborhood he'd grown up in. Then he sent it to Janet with a prayer that it would be enough. Sunday passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. Marcus gathered all his financial documents for the loan application, checked his credit report for the 10th time, and tried to act normal when his father asked if he wanted to join them for Sunday dinner. Thanks, but I have plans, Marcus lied, not mentioning that his plans consisted of eating microwave ramen while obsessively refreshing his email. Monday morning came too slowly and too fast. Marcus was at the bank when it opened at 9 a.m., having taken a rare personal day from work. The loan officer, a middle-aged woman named Brenda, was thorough and professional, asking probing questions about his employment history, his assets, his debts. Your credit score is excellent, she said, typing rapidly. And your income is strong for your age. The only concern is the debt-to-income ratio with this loan amount. It's right at the upper limit of what we typically approve. But it's possible? Marcus tried to keep the desperation out of his voice. It's possible. I'll need to verify your employment and run some additional calculations. You should have a pre-approval letter by end of business today. The rest of Monday crawled by. Marcus sat in a coffee shop, unable to go home to the garage, unable to concentrate on anything but his phone. At 4:47 p.m., the email came through. Congratulations. You have been pre-approved for a home loan up to $625,000. He immediately forwarded it to Janet with shaking hands. Her response came back within minutes. Perfect. The Thompsons loved your letter. They're reviewing all offers tomorrow. Fingers crossed. Marcus spent Monday night in a state of suspended animation. He lay on his air mattress, staring at the ceiling, imagining 2 different futures. One where he got the house and everything changed, and one where he didn't and nothing did. Tuesday at work was torture. He sat through meetings without hearing a word, wrote code that he'd probably have to rewrite later, and checked his phone so often that David asked if he was waiting for medical test results. Something like that, Marcus muttered. At 3:23 p.m., his phone rang. Janet's name on the caller ID made his heart stop. Marcus? Her voice was carefully neutral. Are you somewhere you can talk? Hold on. He practically ran to an empty conference room, closing the door behind him. Okay, I'm here. The Thompsons have made their decision. Marcus gripped the phone so hard his knuckles went white. And? Congratulations, honey. They accepted your offer. The house is yours. The room spun. Marcus had to sit down, his legs suddenly unable to support him. They accepted? Really? Really? Tom Thompson called me personally. He said your letter reminded him why he loved that house in the first place. He wanted it to go to someone who would appreciate it, not just flip it. Janet's voice was warm with satisfaction. We'll start the inspection process immediately, closing in 30 days if all goes well. I can't. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. Months of frustration and humiliation and hope culminating in this moment. Thank you. Thank you so much. You did this, Marcus. You made it happen. Now go celebrate. But quietly. Remember, not a word until we close. Marcus sat in the conference room for another 10 minutes, letting the reality sink in. He'd done it. In 30 days, he'd walk out of that garage for the last time and into his own home. His own space. His own life. When he finally composed himself enough to return to his desk, David was waiting with a concerned expression. Dude, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm okay, Marcus said, and for the first time in months, he meant it. Actually, I'm better than okay. Want to grab those drinks on Friday? I have something to celebrate. Finally. Yeah, absolutely, but what are we celebrating? Marcus smiled, already imagining Linda's face when the moving truck pulled up next door. Let's just say I'm making some changes. Big ones. The rest of the afternoon flew by. Marcus actually focused on his code, energized by the knowledge that everything was about to change. He stayed late, not because he was avoiding the garage, but because he finally had the mental space to do his best work again. When he finally got home, and how much longer would he have to call it that? It was nearly 9 p.m. The main house was quiet, just the flickering of the TV in the living room visible through the windows. Marcus entered the garage and looked around with new eyes. 30 more days. He could survive 30 more days. He pulled out his laptop and began making lists. Things to buy, repairs to prioritize, furniture to source. He'd been living so minimally that starting from scratch felt like freedom rather than a burden. His own couch, his own bed, his own coffee maker in his own kitchen. A knock interrupted his planning. His father entered without waiting for permission, looking tired and older than his 58 years. Working late again? Richard asked, gesturing at the laptop. Just planning some things. Marcus minimized his furniture spreadsheet. Richard sat on the folding chair across from Marcus's makeshift desk, a rare occurrence. Your Aunt Patricia called me today. Marcus's stomach clenched. Oh? She's concerned about you. About your living situation? Richard couldn't meet his eyes. She thinks I'm failing you as a father. What do you think? Marcus asked quietly. Richard was silent for a long moment. I think I'm trying to balance everyone's needs. Linda and the kids. Linda's kids, Marcus corrected. Not your kids. Your kid is sleeping in a garage. That's not fair. You're an adult. So is Trevor. He's 18. Ashley's 17. When do they move to the garage? Richard's face flushed. It's different. They're still in school. I was in school when Mom died. You didn't make me sleep in the garage then. Your mother's death has nothing to do with— It has everything to do with this. Marcus stood, months of suppressed anger finally boiling over. Mom would never have let this happen. She would have fought for me. But you just rolled over the minute Linda suggested I'd be more comfortable out here. Marcus, please. You're being dramatic. It's a converted space, not a prison cell. When's the last time you spent a night out here? Dad? When's the last time you took a shower at 5 a.m. because that's the only time you're allowed in the house without disturbing anyone? Richard stood as well, defensive now. If you're so unhappy, you could always— What? Move out? Find my own place? Marcus laughed bitterly. Don't worry, Dad. I'm working on it. What's that supposed to mean? Marcus almost told him then. Almost blurted out that in 30 days he'd be living next door. A constant reminder of Richard's failures as a father. But he remembered Janet's warning and bit his tongue. Nothing. It means nothing. He turned back to his laptop. I have work to do. Richard lingered for a moment, perhaps sensing that something had shifted between them. Some final line crossed. Marcus. Good night, Dad. After Richard left, Marcus sat in the darkness for a long time. The The confrontation had been building for months, maybe years. It felt like an ending of sorts, but also a beginning. He was done being the dutiful son, accepting whatever scraps of affection and respect his father threw his way. He was done being silent about his treatment. His phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Patricia. "Your father called. He said you two had a fight. Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay," Marcus typed back. "I'll call you this weekend with some news." Good news? The best news. He spent the rest of the evening researching home inspectors and contractors. The house would need some work. The inspection would tell him how much. But he wanted to be prepared. He wanted to transform the Thompson house into something spectacular. Something that would make everyone in the neighborhood take notice, including the family next door who'd relegated him to a garage. As he finally prepared for bed, Marcus took one last look around the space that had been his prison for the past 3 months. The concrete floors, the exposed beams, the single window that reminded him every day of what he'd lost. In 30 days, this would all be a bad memory. In 30 days, he'd wake up in his own bedroom, make coffee in his own kitchen, and live his life on his own terms. The air mattress wheezed as he lay down, but Marcus hardly noticed. He was too busy planning his future, one room at a time, starting with the house next door. The next 30 days passed in a whirlwind of inspections, paperwork, and careful secrets. Marcus became an expert at sneaking around, meeting contractors and inspectors at the Thompson house during his lunch breaks, always parking a block away to avoid detection. The home inspection revealed minor issues. Some electrical work needed updating, the water heater was nearing the end of its life, and there was evidence of an old roof leak in the attic that had been repaired but bore monitoring. Nothing that scared him off. If anything, each flaw made the house feel more real, more his. He threw himself into research with the same intensity he brought to debugging code. YouTube became his university. How to maintain original hardwood floors, DIY kitchen backsplash installation, Pacific Northwest gardening for beginners. His browser history looked like he was planning to become a contractor. In a way, he was. The contractor of his own life. The loan process hit a snag in week 2 when the underwriter questioned the large sum in his checking account from liquidating his investments. "They want to make sure it's not a loan from someone else," Brenda explained over the phone. "Can you provide documentation showing the sale of stocks?" Marcus spent an entire evening gathering statements, transaction histories, and tax documents. Every penny had to be accounted for, sourced, and verified. It was exhausting, but he pushed through, motivated by the vision of December 15th, closing day. Meanwhile, life in the garage continued its surreal rhythm. Linda had noticed his improved mood and seemed suspicious, making pointed comments at family dinners he could hear through the window. "Marcus seems different lately," she'd said one evening, her voice carrying clearly through the thin walls. "Almost happy. It's unusual." "Maybe he's dating someone," Ashley suggested. "With his living situation?" Linda laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "I doubt it." Marcus had smiled grimly from his air mattress, imagining her face when the moving truck arrived. The only person who seemed to sense something significant was happening was Trevor. He'd taken to stopping by the garage more frequently, always with some excuse, borrowing a phone charger, asking about coding, wondering if Marcus had jumper cables. During one visit, he'd looked around the sparse space and asked quietly, "You're leaving soon, aren't you?" Marcus had kept his expression neutral. "What makes you think that?" "You look like someone who's already gone," Trevor said with surprising insight. "Like you're just waiting for your body to catch up with your mind." "Would you blame me if I was?" Trevor shook his head. "No, I'd probably have left already." He paused at the door. "For what it's worth, when you do go, I'll miss having you around. You're the only normal person in this family." "We're not family," Marcus said gently. "But thanks." 3 weeks into the process, Marcus met with Janet at a coffee shop to sign more paperwork. She was vibrating with excitement, treating the whole thing like a covert operation. "I've been dying to tell someone," she confessed, sliding documents across the table. "But I've kept my promise. Not a word to anyone." "I appreciate that," Marcus said, signing where she indicated. "How's everything looking?" "Perfect. The sellers have already moved to Tokyo, so they're motivated to close quickly. Your loan is approved pending the appraisal. Speaking of which," she pulled out her phone. "The appraisal came in this morning. Want to guess?" Marcus held his breath. If the house appraised for less than his offer, the whole deal could fall apart. $650,000? $672,000, Janet grinned. "You've got instant equity, honey. The Thompsons priced it to sell fast, and you benefited." Relief flooded through him. Everything was falling into place. "What's next?" "Final walkthrough the morning of closing. Then we sign papers at 2 p.m. on the 15th. Have you figured out your moving plans?" "I don't have much to move. Marcus said wryly, the benefit of living minimally. But I've arranged for the day off, and I've been ordering furniture for delivery that week. And your father still doesn't know? No one knows, except you and my Aunt Patricia. Marcus had finally called his aunt the previous weekend, and she'd cried with joy and fury in equal measure. I want it to be a surprise. Janet leaned forward conspiratorially. You know I'll have to put a sold sign up as soon as we close. That's going to be quite the reveal. I'm counting on it. The final week before closing, Marcus could barely concentrate on anything. At work, he found himself making simple mistakes, his mind constantly drifting to floor plans and furniture placement. David noticed his distraction during their Friday drinks, the ones Marcus had been postponing for months. Okay, spill, David demanded after Marcus had zoned out for the third time. You've been weird for a month. What's going on? Marcus took a sip of his beer, weighing how much to reveal. Remember how I said I was working on some big changes? Yeah. I bought a house. I close next week. David's eyes widened. Dude, that's amazing. Where? When can I see it? It's in my neighborhood. And you can see it after I close. Marcus hesitated. There's more to the story, but I'll tell you everything next week. For now, just know that things are about to get a lot better. Man, I'm happy for you. You've seemed, I don't know, beaten down lately. It's good to see you excited about something. That night, Marcus lay in the garage for one of the last times, mentally walking through his new home. He'd already decided which bedroom would be his office, where the couch would go in the living room, which window would be perfect for an herb garden. He'd even picked out paint colors, though painting would have to wait until he'd saved up more money. December 15th dawned gray and drizzly, perfect Seattle weather for a life-changing day. Marcus was up at 4 a.m., too excited to sleep. He showered quietly, dressed in his best suit, the one he'd worn to job interviews, and sat in the garage watching the main house wake up through the small window. Richard left for work at 7:30 as usual. Linda drove Ashley to school at 8 QAU. Trevor, who had a late start on Fridays, didn't emerge from the house. The coast was clear. Marcus loaded his car with the few possessions he cared about, his computer equipment, his clothes, his mother's photo albums that he'd managed to save from Linda's decluttering. Everything else could wait. He wanted to be gone before anyone returned. The final walkthrough at 11 a.m. went smoothly. The house was empty and clean, waiting for its next chapter. Marcus walked through each room, no longer seeing what was but what would be. His home, his sanctuary, his statement of independence. At 2 p.m. sharp, Marcus sat in the title company's office, hand cramping as he signed document after document. Janet sat beside him, beaming like a proud mother. The seller's agent attended virtually from Tokyo, the Thompsons' signatures already in place. Congratulations, Mr. Chen, the title agent said, sliding the keys across the table. You're now a homeowner. Marcus stared at the keys in his palm, two small pieces of metal that represented everything he'd worked for. Thank you, he managed, his voice thick with emotion. Janet drove him back to the neighborhood, chattering excitedly about his plans for the house. As they turned onto his street, where he owned a home, Marcus's heart began to race. Oh, look, Janet said innocently. Someone's home. Linda's car was in the driveway. She was unloading groceries, her back to them as Janet pulled up to the Thompson house, Marcus's house. Ready for this? Janet asked. I've been ready for months, Marcus said. They got out of the car just as Linda turned around. Marcus watched the confusion cross her face as she recognized him, then saw Janet pull out the sold sign from her trunk. Janet? Linda called out, setting down her grocery bags. What are you doing? Did the Thompsons sell their house? Janet's smile was brilliantly professional. Yes, closed today, to a wonderful young man who grew up in the neighborhood. She began hammering the sign into the front yard with practiced efficiency. Linda walked closer, her confusion deepening. Marcus, what are you doing here? Moving in, Marcus said simply, holding up his keys. I bought the house. The color drained from Linda's face. You, what? I bought the house, he repeated, savoring each word. I'll be living here now. Looks like we're neighbors. But how? When? Linda sputtered, looking between Marcus and Janet as if this might be an elaborate prank. I've been working on it for a while, Marcus said calmly. Funny how much money you can save when you're paying $800 a month to sleep in a garage. Really motivated me to find better accommodations. Janet finished with the sign and turned to Linda with a smile that could cut glass. Isn't it wonderful? Marcus is such an accomplished young man. Microsoft engineer, homeowner at 25. His mother would be so proud. She emphasized mother, just enough to make Linda flinch. I should get my things from the garage, Marcus said. Don't worry, I'll be out within the hour. You can rent it to someone else now. Maybe one of your kids would like the independence. Linda's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. She looked like she'd been slapped. "I'll leave you to it," Janet said cheerfully. "Marcus, call me if you need anything. And welcome to the neighborhood. Well, officially, anyway." As Janet drove away, Marcus walked past Linda toward his father's house, former residence, without another word. He could feel her staring after him, could practically hear the gears turning in her head as she processed this new reality. In the garage, Marcus quickly gathered his remaining belongings. It took less than 15 minutes to pack up his entire life there. As he carried the last box to his car, Trevor appeared in the doorway. "Holy shit," Trevor said, looking at the boxes. "You actually did it. You bought the house next door?" "I did." Trevor let out a low whistle. That's incredible. And kind of savage. Mom's going to lose her mind." "That's not my problem anymore," Marcus said, but not unkindly. "You're welcome to visit, by the way, if you ever need a break from here." Trevor nodded slowly. Yeah, I might take you up on that." He helped Marcus carry the last box to his car. "Good for you, man. Seriously." As Marcus drove the 50 feet to his new driveway, he saw Linda still standing in her yard, phone pressed to her ear, probably calling his father. He wondered how Richard would react, but found he didn't really care. This wasn't about his father anymore. It wasn't even about Linda, really. It was about him, reclaiming his life and his dignity. He unlocked his front door, and stepped inside. The empty house echoed with possibility. No furniture yet, no decorations, just space that was entirely his. Marcus set down his boxes and walked to the kitchen window, the one that looked directly into his father's backyard. Through it, he could see the garage where he'd spent the last 3 months. It looked smaller from here, less significant, just a storage space, which is all it ever should have been. His phone buzzed. A text from his father. "Linda just called me. We need to talk." Marcus looked at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. They could talk later. Right now, he had furniture deliveries to wait for, utilities to set up, a life to build. He walked through his empty house, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. In the living room, late afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, warming the space. Marcus sat down in the middle of the floor, overwhelmed by the reality of what he'd accomplished. For the first time in months, he was home. Not in someone else's space, not tolerated or relegated or dismissed. Home. The tears came then. Months of frustration and hurt and determination flowing out in the privacy of his own walls. He cried for his mother, who would have been so proud. He cried for the relationship with his father that had been sacrificed to Linda's manipulations. He cried for the young man who'd been made to feel unwelcome in his childhood home. But mostly, he cried from relief. He'd done it. He'd refused to be broken, refused to accept less than he deserved. And now, every single day, Linda would look out her window and see the proof of her failure to diminish him. A knock at the door interrupted his emotional release. Marcus quickly wiped his eyes and went to answer it. A delivery driver stood on his porch with the first of his furniture orders, a bed frame and mattress, his first real bed in 3 months. "Where would you like these?" the driver asked. "Master bedroom," Marcus said, the words tasting like freedom. "I'll show you the way." As the delivery team worked, more neighbors began to notice the activity. Mrs. Patterson from across the street came over to investigate, her eyes widening when she recognized Marcus. "Marcus Chen, is that you? Did you buy the Thompson place?" "I did, Mrs. Patterson. Just closed today." "Oh, how wonderful. Your mother would be beside herself with joy. I still miss seeing her in her garden." She glanced meaningfully at the house next door. "It will be nice to have a Chen in the neighborhood who actually belongs here." The dig at Linda wasn't subtle, but Marcus appreciated it nonetheless. His mother had been beloved in the neighborhood, while Linda had never quite fit in despite her attempts to ingratiate herself at the country club. By evening, Marcus had a bed, a couch, and a kitchen table. The basics. He ordered pizza, his first meal in his own home, and ate it sitting on his new couch, looking out at the street where he'd grown up. Through the window, he could see his father's BMW pulling into the driveway. Richard sat in the car for a long moment before getting out, his shoulders slumped. Marcus's phone rang, his father's name on the screen. This time, he answered. "Hi, Dad." "Marcus." Richard's voice was strained. "Is it true? You bought the Thompson house?" "I did. Closed this afternoon." Silence stretched between them. Then, "Why didn't you tell me? Would it have mattered? Would you have been happy for me? Or would you have told Linda and let her try to sabotage it somehow?" I wouldn't have." "Dad." Marcus's voice was tired but firm. "We both know you would have told her, and we both know she would have found a way to make it about her. This was something I needed to do alone. How did you even afford it? Turns out when you're motivated enough, you can save a lot of money. Even paying $800 a month to sleep in a garage." Richard flinched audibly at that. Marcus, about that, I don't want to talk about it anymore, Marcus interrupted. What's done is done. I have my own place now. We can be neighbors or not. That's up to you. You're my son. Am I? Because for the last few months, I've felt more like an unwanted tenant. Marcus softened his voice. Look, Dad, I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it to save myself. If you want to have a relationship going forward, I'm open to that. But it has to be on equal terms. I won't be treated as less than Linda's children anymore. They're just kids, Marcus. Trevor is 18. He's an adult, just like I was when Mom died. The difference is, when Mom died, you didn't kick me out of my room. Marcus took a deep breath. I'm going to go now. I have a lot to do to get settled. We can talk more later if you want. But Dad, next time you come over, use the front door. I don't live in the garage anymore. He hung up before his father could respond. Almost immediately his phone buzzed with texts, but Marcus ignored them. He'd said what he needed to say. As night fell over his first day as a homeowner, Marcus walked through his house one more time, turning on lights, adjusting the thermostat, small acts of ownership that felt monumental. In the master bedroom, he made his new bed with the sheets he'd bought, simple gray cotton that smelled like fresh possibilities. Before getting into bed, his bed, in his house, Marcus stood at the window that faced his father's home. He could see Linda in the kitchen gesticulating wildly as she talked to Richard. He could imagine the conversation, the blame she'd assign, the way she'd try to make herself the victim of his success. But it didn't matter anymore. Let her rage. Let her realize that the stepson she'd pushed aside hadn't been broken or driven away. He'd simply relocated, 50 feet to the left, where every morning when she retrieved her newspaper, she'd see his car in the driveway. Where every evening when she cooked dinner, she'd know he was cooking his own meal in his own kitchen. Where every single day, for as long as they both lived there, she'd have to confront the fact that she'd underestimated him. Marcus smiled and closed the curtains. Tomorrow, he'd start making this house truly his. He'd already scheduled meetings with contractors for the weekend, had paint samples arriving, had plans for every room. But tonight, he just wanted to savor this moment. He climbed into his new bed, sinking into the mattress that didn't deflate, in a room with proper heating, in a house with his name on the deed. For the first time in months, Marcus Chen fell asleep without the sound of cars passing on the street, without the smell of motor oil, without the humiliation of being unwelcome in his own home. He was home now. Really, truly home. And 50 feet away, Linda Summers Chen was learning what it felt like to be haunted by the consequences of her own cruelty. Marcus's last thought before drifting off was that his mother would have found the whole thing deliciously ironic. He could almost hear her laugh, warm and approving, welcoming him home. The first month in his new home passed in a blur of contractors, deliveries, and small renovations. Marcus had budgeted carefully, prioritizing essential repairs while planning future improvements. He replaced the aging water heater, updated the electrical panel, and had the hardwood floors professionally refinished until they gleamed like honey in the afternoon light. Every improvement felt like a small victory. Each painted wall and installed fixture another step away from the garage and toward the life he deserved. He turned the smallest bedroom into a proper home office, complete with a standing desk and dual monitors. The second bedroom became a guest room, though he had no immediate plans for guests. Just having the option felt luxurious. The neighborhood dynamics shifted in interesting ways. Mrs. Patterson became a regular visitor, often stopping by with cookies or casseroles, always with a story about Marcus's mother. She would have loved what you've done with the garden beds, Mrs. Patterson said one Saturday morning, admiring the fresh mulch Marcus had spread around the rhododendrons. Lily had such a green thumb. I see you inherited it. Marcus hadn't inherited it so much as YouTube tutorialed it, but he appreciated the connection to his mother nonetheless. He'd made a point of restoring the garden to something she would have been proud of, even planting the same variety of roses she'd grown in their old yard. The most interesting development was his evolving relationship with Trevor. His stepbrother had taken to stopping by once or twice a week, always with some excuse but really just seeming to need a break from the tension next door. Linda had not taken Marcus's move well. She's convinced you did this specifically to spite her, Trevor said one evening, sprawled on Marcus's couch while a basketball game played on the new TV. Dad tries to tell her it's not about her, but she won't hear it. It's partially about her, Marcus admitted, handing Trevor a soda. But mostly it was about me, about not accepting less than I deserve. Yeah, well, now she's paranoid you're watching her all the time. She keeps the curtains closed on this side of the house. Trevor took a sip of his drink. It's actually kind of peaceful. Less natural light, but also less of her complaining about everything. These visits became a regular thing, an unspoken arrangement where Trevor could escape the suffocating atmosphere of his mother's domain. Marcus found he didn't mind the company. Trevor was actually pretty decent when removed from Linda's influence, and it felt good to provide a refuge, even if it was for his stepmother's son. The real test came 3 weeks after moving in, when Richard finally worked up the courage to visit. Marcus heard the doorbell on a Sunday afternoon and found his father standing on the porch, looking uncomfortable and holding a bottle of wine. "Peace offering," Richard said, lifting the bottle. "Can I come in?" Marcus stepped aside. "Of course." Richard entered slowly, taking in the renovations with obvious surprise. "You've done a lot already." "I had a lot of motivation." Marcus led him to the living room. "Have a seat. I'll get glasses." In the kitchen, Marcus took a moment to center himself. This was the conversation they'd been avoiding for years, the reckoning that his move had finally forced. He grabbed 2 wine glasses and a corkscrew, returning to find his father studying the family photos Marcus had hung on the wall, all pictures from before Linda, when it had just been the 3 of them. "I remember this day," Richard said softly, pointing to a photo from Marcus's high school graduation. "Your mother was so proud. She cried through the entire ceremony." "She cried at everything," Marcus said, opening the wine. "Happy tears," she always said. They sat in silence for a moment, sipping the wine, a nice Cabernet that Marcus recognized as expensive. Finally, Richard spoke. "I owe you an apology." Marcus waited, not making it easier. "I failed you," Richard continued, his voice heavy. "After your mother died, I was so lost. And when Linda came along, she seemed to have everything figured out. She took charge, made decisions, and I just let her, even when those decisions hurt you." "Why?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. Why was it so easy to choose her comfort over mine? Richard stared into his wine glass. "Because fighting with her was exhausting. And you never complained. You just handled everything with such grace. I convinced myself you were fine. I was sleeping in a garage, Dad." "I know," Richard's voice cracked. "I know, and I'm ashamed. Your mother would be disgusted with me." "Yes," Marcus agreed simply. "She would." They sat with that truth between them, heavy but necessary. Finally, Richard looked up, meeting Marcus's eyes for the first time in months. "Is there any way forward for us? Any chance you can forgive me?" Marcus considered the question. The hurt was still there, might always be there. But holding on to anger was exhausting, and he'd built his new life as a testament to moving forward. "I can try," he said eventually, "but things have to be different. I won't pretend the last year didn't happen, and I won't subject myself to Linda's treatment anymore. She's actually been subdued lately," Richard admitted. "Your move shook her. She keeps asking how you afforded it, insisting I must have helped you secretly." "And what did you tell her?" "The truth. That my son is exceptional and succeeded despite my failures, not because of my help." It was more backbone than Marcus had seen from his father in years. Maybe there was hope after all. "Sunday dinners," Marcus said suddenly. "Just you and me. We could start there." Richard's face lit up with desperate hope. "I'd like that. Here or here. This is my home. You're welcome in it." Marcus paused. "Linda isn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever." "I understand." They finished the bottle of wine, conversation flowing easier as they discussed safer topics. Marcus's work, Richard's latest cases, plans for the house. When Richard finally left, they shook hands at the door, a formal gesture that felt appropriate for their rebuilt relationship's tentative foundation. The next morning brought a new challenge. Marcus was leaving for work when he found Linda standing in his driveway, arms crossed, wearing her trademark expression of controlled fury. "We need to talk," she announced. Marcus clicked his key fob, unlocking his car. "No, we don't. Please get off my property." "Your property." She practically spat the words. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Buying this house, trying to make some kind of point? The only point I've made is that I refuse to be pushed around." Marcus opened his car door. "Now please leave. I have to get to work." "This isn't over," Linda hissed. "You've disrupted our entire family dynamic." "What family?" Marcus finally turned to face her fully. "We were never family, Linda. You made that clear when you relegated me to the garage. I'm just your husband's inconvenient son.